Okay, good day to our viewers. I want to welcome you once again today to our new episode. We are talking about something which is very, very sensitive, but at the same time, to me, it's very, very important. Before then, I want to thank all our viewers. First of all, I want to thank the team that I'm working with for their selfless effort and commitment to the path and their selfless sacrifices that they've been making over the years. I think now we've gone down to 2 years, I guess, and then it's been a hard road to travel. So I just want to thank all of them and thank myself too as well. To thank myself as well. And also to thank all the universal intelligences, all the angels, all the spirit beings of the divine creator, the sublime intelligence creator, our guidance spirit, and all entities that has aided us throughout the journey to this far. Is a hard way to travel, coupled with its temptations, coupled with its attacks, coupled with its setback and frustrations. I also want to thank you for your commitment and for your time, for your energy that you've been sending consciously and unconsciously, as well as for your support and kind. This beautiful place you see, this office you see, are contribution from dedicated people who want to see this thing strive and become successful. So to all those that have assisted in diverse ways, we say thank you, and for those who are still assisting, we say thank you. Today we are going to talk about sin. And I know when I mention the subject sin, people may be wondering, because it's not a common subject within the fraternity of the spiritual teachers of the new age. So it's a subject that has remained in the background and remain a little bit relegated to oblivion. But I feel it is very, very important subject that we need to discuss as part of our spiritual journey and spiritual ascension. We cannot do without the concept of sin. Okay, the concept of sin, because fundamentally what we have perceived to be sin is not necessarily what sin may necessarily be. We have the religious concept of sin, we have the traditional concept of sin, we have the national concept of sin, we have the geographical concept of sin. So sin may vary depending on your culture, tradition, geographical location, nation of origin, and a few other things, social and spiritual dynamics in which you are connected to. Sin may vary to people relative to these conditions that I've talked about. But I want us to look at sin from a universal point of view, that irrespective of where you belong, what you do, what you don't do, what cultures you find yourself in, or you belong to, what cultures you don't belong to, it's applicable to you and to everyone on the unit on earth. So I want us to look at the concept of sin, because it's a serious subject that, if not well treated, is a subtle energy that is kind of obstructing people's progress, both physically and spiritually, that we don't pay much attention to. And because of the way the church has kind of projected the concept of sin, people are kind of fed up and they really don't want to hear no more. But truthfully speaking, sin, whatever we have called sin, okay, with whatever situation, whichever condition which we have named sin or wrong or offense, is an energy. Okay, so we must look at whatever I'm going to discuss from the perspective of an energy. Okay, because everything around this physical dimension is energy, and we are going to treat subsequently, we are going to treat several topics like addiction, how to deal with addiction because addiction is energy, how to deal with character formation because it is energy. If you have a child who is truant, what informs the child truancy? If you have a child who is disrespectful, what informs the child disrespectfulness? The most often than not, we look at the effect, and we see the effect being the characteristics of the manifestation of that energy, and then we want to treat the effect, and we don't attend to the cause that gives those characteristics effect. And that is how we'll be struggling. So what I want us to look at is see this whole concept of sin from the dimension of energy. Whether what you perceive as sin, whether it's from biblical point of view, covetousness, anger, bitterness, fornication, adultery, idolatry, everything, it's energy. Okay, if you go to other places, not meditating, not engaging in fruitive activities and all those things, not kind of paying obeisance to certain deities, and not being in devotional service, okay, that they may see it as sin. It all has to do with energy. So let's look at it from the perspective of energy, because if you want to look at it from the concept of sin, it may vary, but when you look at it from the perspective of energy, then it is applicable to all aspects of our endeavors. So then I need to use the word sin to replace that energy that causes people to behave or act in a way and manner which is not conducive for their personal growth and progress, as well as for the collective good, progress and growth of any society. So anytime I use the word sin, please understand that we are dealing with that particular energy. So the question is, what is sin? What is sin? If we should understand sin, then we would be able to fathom whether we are going wrong or we are doing right. Okay, so when you study the concept of sin metaphysically, sin simply means the exercise of force against the exercise of force against personal, interpersonal, divine, and spiritual or universal will. The exercise of force against personal, interpersonal, divine, or universal or spiritual force. Okay, so divine will, anything that you do that you cannot exercise some level of pressure that intends to compel another energy, whether be it a personal energy, interpersonal energy, divine energy, spiritual energy, whatever you do that compels an energy to act against free will, it's a sin. So then you would know where we've been going wrong. So simply, the exercise of force against personal, interpersonal, and divine will, let's put it that way. The exercise of force against personal will, interpersonal will, and divine will constitutes or generates an energy, and that energy is what we call sin. And it's that energy that produces that characteristics that is unacceptable in society. So somebody once said, the exercise of force in Christianity is contradictory to the principles of God's government. Hence, you do not exercise force against free will. Because anytime you tend to exercise force against free will, personal will, interpersonal will, and divine will, or the universal law of this universe, then what you are doing is that you are contravening the natural order. And when you contravene the natural order, this is what is being described as sin. Anytime you act in a way and manner that contravenes the natural order of existence, you have sinned. And that is the most grievous sin ever. So now, by this premise that I've given you, you would understand where you have sinned. So if you want money from me and I am not willing to give you the money, then you use ways and means to force me and compel me against my will to give you the money. You have sinned. That is the concept we call sin. Because what happened is that even though I give out the money, but I generate a particular energy in giving out the money, and that energy is not conducive for the collective good of the universe. Because either I am going to give the money in pain, which pain is an energy, or I am going to give the money grudgingly, which grudgingly is an energy. And whether I give the money in pain, or I give the money grudgingly, or I give the money uncheerfully, I have generated a particular energy which is unconducive for the collective good of existence of this universe. And that is what is considered as sin, or that's what we call sin. So by now you would understand that there are a lot of things that you may have perceived as sin, but actually it's not sin, because there's no exercise of force against divine will, personal will, or interpersonal will. So now that you understand the concept of sin, sin comes in 3 different levels. Sin comes in 3 different levels. We have sin in the state of thought. We have sin in the state of feeling or emotion. And we have sin in the state of what? Action. So these are the 3 levels of sin that we have. Sin in the state of thought, sin in the state of feeling or emotion, and sin in the state of action. So any thought you have that tends to exercise force against free will is a sin, even though it has not manifested, but it is considered as a sin. Any feeling that you have that you intend to exert against free will is also considered as a sin. Be it a desire, emotion, whatever it is, as long as it rises against divine will or free will, it is a sin. That is why in the Bible, the Bible talks about the fact that God said, "This day I put before thee life and death, good and evil, choose." Because every soul has been given what we call the free will, the ability to decide what and what not to do. And man has no right to exercise force against that free will. And the exercise of force against that free will within the concept of divinity, within the concept of personal, within the concept of interpersonal dealings, results as sin. So I don't know if we've watched this movie, that Morgan Freeman played the God, Bruce Almighty. Okay, if you watch this movie for Bruce Almighty, there was this guy who was against everything he was doing. He was bitter because he thought he was a comedian in the media house, and he was so mad at God and all those. Eventually he caught up with God. Eventually he caught up with God, and God has to relinquish all his powers for him to play God for some time to see how it feels like to be God. Now when God relinquished, and the one who played God in that movie was Morgan Freeman. I wonder why they use black man as God. And in most movies, anytime they want to use God, they use black man as God. Obviously, yes, when you go into nitty-gritties, into the details of metaphysical and transcendental knowledge, you understand why they use the black man as God. So Morgan Freeman played God. So Morgan Freeman relinquished or gave all his powers as God to this young man to play God for some time, to feel how it feels like to be God, to be disturbed by all these prayers and wrong accusations and everything. But when God gave the power to this young man, when Morgan gave the power to this young man, he gave him only one condition to the power. He said, never use the power against free will. That was the only one. He said, he told him, you can use the power to do anything that you want. Do whatever you want. But respect free will. Because anytime you rise against free will, you have rise against the divine order and divine ordinances. And that is the sin. So you see, there are a lot of people that are sinning that they don't know they are sinning. And it is affecting their spiritual and physical life. And that is why the topic we are discussing today is the effect of sin in your life and your spiritual development. The effect of sin in your life, that means in your personal life, or your physical life, or your material life, and your spiritual development. So there are a lot of people that are sinning in many ways at the subtle level, unknown to them, because it is not categorized in the so-called known sins. So I am telling you that anytime your actions tends to rise against free will, you have sinned. You can take it or leave it. You must always and always unconditionally respect free will. But this free will was not given to man by man. This free will is a divine ordinance. It's a divine will, it's a divine instruction. And all entities, be it metaphysical or transcendental entities, respect that free will. That is why one man said that the exercise of force in Christianity is contradictory to the divine principles of God's governance, because God does not force. Hence, anybody that forces orders is against divine governance. And if we do not understand this concept of sin, and we do not deal with this concept of sin, we realize that everything we are doing, experiences a lot of impediments in our way. And if you want to go into the very nitty-gritties of sin, it's going to be a whole long episodes, which I have no intentions of wasting a lot of time on it. So I want to give you a general overview, probably in 2 or 3 episodes, and you know how to deal with these issues in your life. At the moment somebody reaches the discretional age, okay, at the moment one reaches the discretional age, you do not have to exercise force against the person's free will. What is the discretional age? The discretional age is the age that one is able to use his individual discriminative selective intelligence. Because a child from the age of 1 throughout 10, 11, 12 has some level of discretion, but that discretion is not selective discretion. It's a discretion based on instinct. So such child, you can exert a little bit pressure on that child, because at that level he has not developed that inner psychic ability to be able to use its individual discriminative intelligence. But at the moment you are dealing with somebody that a person has developed his or her individual discriminate selective intelligence, which is the IDSI, you must not exercise force against the person's free will, irrespective. There must be always what we call mutual consent. That is why you need to get the consent of the person. That means that getting the consent of the person is allowing the person to give you his will. To execute or to do whatever you want to do with the person. If the person does not give you his or her consent, that is why even in our fiscal law, when you do something against the concept of the person, it is considered as a crime. Even in the natural law, in our fiscal political laws, it is considered as a crime because you didn't seek the consent of the person. In any court of competent jurisdiction, it will be considered as a crime for not seeking the consent of the person to carry out certain responsibility against the person's will. That is why even when you go to the hospital and they want to do medical procedures, they would have to get somebody to give consent, isn't it? That means mutually giving out your will for somebody else's to take charge of your will. That is why even in law, if you have traveled and there is a legal proceedings or legal process you're going through and you cannot be around and you want somebody to represent you, you give what you call what? Consent, in the form of what? Letter of attorney. So these things I'm talking about, they are fundamental, even in our fiscal laws. Because nobody can just go and represent you in court without you giving the person your consent, in the form of granting the person letter of attorney. When somebody does that, in law, the person is considered as an impersonator and can be prosecuted for impersonation, representing somebody that you are not, without the person's consent, without the person's free will. And it said that as above, what? So below. So the general concept of sin that we have perceived as sin is embarking on an action, an emotion, or a thought against the free will of another person, especially when the person has developed his individual discriminated selective intelligence, IDSI. And the reason why one is held liable and responsible for his or her actions in any court of competent jurisdiction is because at that level the person has developed his IDSI. Anybody that has not developed his individual discriminated selective intelligence, when he's presented to court, he is considered as a juvenile. And the kind of considerations of the situation, even if it's a murder case, under certain age, is not treated as grievous as somebody who has developed his individual discriminative selective intelligence, because at that level the person has his will in his own hands and he turns in whichever way he pleases. And these situations I'm talking about excludes special souls that don't have their own free will. They have will to some extent, but their wills are limited because of their karmic divine assignment that they came to this earth with. That's not what we are talking about. That one too is there. There are some people that they don't have much of their free will. Okay, like for instance, as I sit here, I've been told that any commercial job that I do, they are going to put a hand on it until I'm doing what I am doing. So my will to do commercial business, or my free will to do any kind of commercial business to give me revenue, has some kind of limitation. But that is not coming from man, but coming from the source, based on my karmic covenant agreement before taking this incarnation. And I have tried many jobs, and it all came to nothing. So that is not what I am talking about. But I am talking about man to man, personal, and doing things that rises against the general order of free will. It's the same. And what I am saying, I want you to think of it very deeply, because there are a lot of things that people are doing. People are going through a lot of experience in life, and they have attributed it to witches. They have attributed it to some kind of curses. They have attributed it to some kind of spiritual activity, and some of these things are a product of the people's own ignorant actions. They are a product of the people's ignorant action that is being embarked on in what we call sin, that is exercise of force against free will. So I'll give you certain scenarios before I'll bring this session to a closure. We'll continue. I told you we're going to have about several episodes to this, so that it's not going to be a little bit of a burden. And for instance, and let me take it from the marital perspective, because that is where a lot of problems are. Anytime you wish to have, marital responsibility for those who are married with your wife or your spouse, and the spouse doesn't give his consent, and you forcefully find your way to that spouse, you have sinned. Because it's like, it has to be a mutual consensus. And when it is against free will, against the will of your spouse, and men most of the time are guilty of such actions, it is a sin. In as much as some women take advantage of those situations to say, I'm not in the mood, and don't give them their will, but whatever the conditions are, it is still a sin, because it is an action and an emotion that is executed against the free will of another party. It's a serious matter I'm talking about. Sometimes, if a lady wants something from the husband, and the husband does not give out his consent or his will to freely give her that thing, then some ladies then uses their divine gift to kind of compel the man by denying the man access to their body, to compel the man against his will to give them what they want. It is a sin. I know this is going to create a lot of thinking, but that is the truth I'm telling you. Anything that you do, directly or indirectly, emotionally, psychologically, or in action, that gets somebody to act against his free will, is a sin. It doesn't matter how you look at it. I don't really concern myself with how you picture it, but that is the truth I'm telling you. And it is the truth that you have to know, that the truth will set you free. And that is why when you sleep with your own wife without the consent of your wife, if you repulse it, you can be prosecuted. And sometimes it is considered as rape. Because rape is having a sexual engagement without the free will, or without the will or consent of the other party involved. Because where there is no mutual consent, there's a problem. Because the universe operates in balance. The negative and positive, male and female, must agree mutually in order to create the balance. The reason why the exercise of force against free will constitutes what we call sin, because it throws the universal balance out, or it throws the universe out of balance, or it throws that universal ordinance out of balance. Not in terms of relationship, but in terms of every endeavors in life. That is why for me, because I understand the secrets of this universe, when I work with people, I don't force them to do things. I give people the chance to do things according to their will. That is why I don't want to entice people to do things. Well, there are times that you can use enticement, which is a more subtle, finer approach of rising against people's will. For instance, you're in office and a young beautiful girl comes to seek for a job. You know that lady is desperately in need of a job, yet is qualified. And you want to take advantage of her carnally before you want to give her the job. If it's left with her free will alone, she wouldn't do it. But because you hold the key to that job and she so desperately needs that job, you cause her to act against her will. And that is a sin, and a very big one for that matter. Somebody is your employee. You want to engage that your employee out of his regular schedule. Because you think you are his employer and you pay him salary, you really care less whether he or she is willing to carry out that responsibility or assignment you are giving to her or him. And because he too, you are his employer, and does not want to offend you, that probably you may sack him, against his will, he will do what you want for you. It's a sin, because it's against free will. So if I want to get somebody to do something out of the person's way, I try to make sure, if it do not bother, I don't know, please, sometimes if I want Abraham to do something, I want Abraham to do something, or any other person to do something, I say, please, if it will not bother you, can you please help me with this? If it will not bother you. I use the word "it will not bother you" because I want you to do it out of your free will, because I don't want to find myself convicted of a crime against free will. When you go down, you understand why. And this can disorient you in everything you are doing in this material dimension forever, including your spiritual ascension. Because don't forget that the soul you are dealing with, and you've risen against that soul's free will, is God. That person you are dealing with is an incarnation of divinity right within the material body. So anytime you rise against that free will of that person, you have risen against the free will of your own essence and against the free will of the source, which is the divine essence, which is God. And when you rise against the divine will and you subject the divine will into situations which is not from his will, can you imagine the kind of mess you are creating in your own spectrum of personality? It doesn't matter who you are dealing with. I repeat, it doesn't matter who you are dealing with, whether it's your staff, it's your child, it's your wife, it's your husband, it's your younger sibling, whoever you are dealing with. As long as the person has developed his or her individual discriminate selective intelligence, you must do so in accordance with the person's free will. It doesn't matter. You must do so in accordance with the person's free will. As long as the person has developed his individual discriminating selective intelligence, be it your child, be it your wife, be it your husband, be it your spouse, and whatever it is, be it your siblings, be it a friend, as long as the person has reached that age that he's been able to develop, or he has developed his individual discriminating selective intelligence, you must deal with the person, always seeking the person's consent and free will in engaging the person's energy. And that is why when your son or daughter reaches that discretional age of selective intelligence, and you tend to kind of always exert your will over his free will, it gets to a time he will naturally revolt. Thank you. It gets to a time that he would naturally revolt. If it's your husband, he gets to a time he will naturally revolt. If it's your wife, it gets to a time he will naturally revolt. If it is citizens in a nation and the government rises against the free will of the citizens and subject and suppress the citizens, one day, those citizens would naturally revolt. The revolt is not coming out of disrespect, but the revolt is erupting from a natural desire which has developed as a result of you rising against divine ordinances. And anytime you rise against divine ordinances, divinity at the set time will rise his will against you. And when the divinity rises his will against you, there will be mass destruction, because it's going to order its space. So when you keep rising against free will, which we call sin, it could be adultery, it could be in the form of fornication, it could be in the form of idolatry, it could be in the form of stealing, it could be in the form of backbiting, it could be in the form of jealousy. Whichever act, which all these things I've mentioned, they are effects of the energy that makes you rise against free will. When you keep using that energy to rise against free will through the exhibition of these characteristics in the effect form, what happens is that someday, somehow, that person or that personality that you keep rising against his free will, at a certain point in time, his divine nature will erupt, because it is not the personality that you are rising against, you are rising against the person's divinity, and that divinity will erupt to show you its true nature, that he harnesses the power. And this is what has caused chaos in a lot of relationship, in a lot of marriages, in a lot of father-child relationship, mother-child relationship, in a lot of siblings, among family, among extended family. It has erupted in a lot of confusion and has brought division, because we do not exercise the freedom of free will. And when you watch in the civilized lands, they know this secret. So even with a child, when they want to do something for a child, they kind of try to sit the child down to kind of get the child's what word do I use? To get a child to buy into what the family wants to do. It doesn't matter the age of the child, as long as the child even begins to use his own instinctive discretion, they begin to involve the child. That is when and where progress of community and society and family is achieved. For instance, when we move from our old place to our new place, my son is only 8 years, my firstborn is the second one is about 6 years or something, and I needed to change their school. Well, a regular father would just take you to the school and then 4 minutes, okay, we'll run down, take you to the school and then do what? Put us. I was in the car one day with them and I told her, look son, kids, now we moved, we need to do something because of the distance from the place we are now, the new place that we are, to the old place, to the old school. It's a little bit far, and the nature of my work is going to disturb me and it's going to get me frustrated. At the same time, not only me, you have to wake up at certain times that you're not going to have enough sleep, and all those is stressful. So what do we do? I was sitting in the car with them. And I said, so what do we do? The elder one, which by then it was 7 years, okay, because he turned 8 when we moved to the new place. They were quiet in the car. And then the younger man said, Daddy, for me, they are like Ruby Joe, which is the old school. But the elder one sat quietly. He said, Daddy, Ruby Joe is a very good school. I wish I would be there. But the new place we are staying is very, very far. So what do we do? I said, okay, fine. So for now, the only option we have now is to look for a place temporary to see the performance of the school. If the school is as good as the old one, then we save your stress, you save my stress, we are all happy. But if you go there for some time and it's still not as good as Ruby Joe, then we have to find alternative. We'll sit down and put our heads together. So do you agree we look for this new school? And they say yes. Then they started. Because of that, I didn't have struggling them going to school. But even that, the second one had a little bit of problems, and every time I want to go to new school, then I have to now engage them, sit them down. You know something? There's the principle of change in life, and change is the only thing which is constant. And change comes with its own consequences and comes with its own adjustment and adaptations. And these are things you must accept in life. And I got their mind bothered, and then eventually they bought into that idea, and then everything settled calmly. You understand? In as much as they are kids that they've not used reader individual discriminatory intelligence, but I still wanted to buy their interest because it's going to make the work easier for me. You see? So you must always respect free will. You must always respect free will. So now we understand what sin is. Sin is not sin only is not the effect of the actions that you take, but it is the energy that drives the action, and it's the energy that rises against free will, either personal free will, interpersonal free will, or divine will. Now, in our next episode, I will end on this episode. In our next episode, we are going to look at the 3 types of sin. Okay? In our next, this is a general discussion. In the next episode, we are going to look at the 3 types of sin, and if you're unable to finish